Welcome back to our APES flipped classroom, and today we are talking about adaptations and evolution. So let's jump right in. So we're going to begin by talking about this theory of fitness and how fitness in the evolutionary sense and adaptations work together. So all populations are going to have some genetic diversity. There's going to be variability in the genomes of the individuals. So why does that exist? Well, we have genetic diversity for many different reasons. One of them is random mutations while DNA is being copied. And those random mutations are going to create new traits. So we have our original sequence of DNA, and for whatever reason, there is a point mutation, and that's going to change the genetic sequence. Another potential reason is when you have crossing over in parent chromosomes, and that's going to create new combinations of genes and therefore traits. So when we have these aligned homologous chromosomes, we have chromosome crossover, and so that creates new recombinant chromatids, and we have random mutation. When that trait, that new trait that is created, increases an organism's ability to survive and reproduce, we call that an adaptation. So we have the adaptations, we have this change in the genetic makeup that makes an organism have an advantage. When we have that advantage and then we have natural selection, that means that the organisms that are better adapted to the environment are going to survive, and they're going to reproduce more. They're going to create more offspring because they're more likely to reach adulthood and reproduce. That means they're going to pass those adaptations on to their offspring. And the individuals that don't have that adaptation are not going to survive to adulthood, which means they're not going to have offspring, not going to pass that on to their offspring. And that leads to the entire population having the adaptation over time. And we call that evolution. Generally, there's going to be a selective pressure, a selective force, and that's the environmental condition that is going to kill individuals without the adaptation. So for example, we have a predator, we have a hawk eating mice, and the mice that are darker are less visible to the hawk and therefore are less likely to be consumed by the hawk. The mice, therefore, that are darker are going to pass those traits on to their offspring, which is going to mean that the next generation is going to be darker because that adaptation makes them more likely to survive and reproduce. So in this case, our hawk is the selective pressure. So when we talk about evolution and adaptations, it's really important to remember that genes mutate, individuals adapt, and populations evolve. So we cannot talk about an individual as evolving. An individual can only adapt, but a population over time can evolve. So we have selective pressure from predators, but we can also have selective pressure from our environment. And so the environment that that organism lives in is going to determine which traits are adaptations, which traits are advantageous. So as the environment changes, different traits that might have been advantageous before may become disadvantages, and new traits may become adaptations. For example, if we have a drought, it may mean that only hard seeds are available, which means that finches that don't have the large beaks that are able to crack those hard seeds are at a disadvantage. And so it's going to kill off those smaller beaked birds and give an advantage to the larger beaked birds. So you can see in our graphic here that there was a drought in 1976 or 1977. And so in just a 2-year span, you can see that there are far fewer birds. It went from over 700 to less than 100, but of those that survived, they have a much larger beak. And so that tells us that those individuals were better able to survive through the drought. And that's going to change the makeup of the entire population. And this is a great example of a bottleneck effect. So we have this drought in 1977. Our population is reduced by over 80%. And you can see that going forward, the offspring are much more likely to have these larger beaks. And so this bottleneck effect is going to change the makeup of the entire population. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about pace of evolution, because evolution is not, generally speaking, a fast process. So the more rapidly the environment changes, the less likely an organism in that environment is going to be able to adapt to those changes. Sorry, move myself out of the way. If that pace is too fast, many species are going to migrate out of that environment, or they may die off completely if they are either unable to migrate or can't migrate fast enough. So for example, if the ocean warms too quickly, many of species of fish may not be able to migrate before they run out of oxygen and suffocate. So pace of change definitely makes a difference. The more genetic diversity in a population, the better they're able to adapt to environmental change, because we have a higher chance that some individuals are going to have those advantageous adaptations, that they're going to have those good mutations. So when we have a bottleneck effect, it makes that population less likely to survive the next change. Okay, and the longer the lifespan of an organism, the slower the rate of evolution, because evolution depends on generational change. And so the longer there is between generations, the more slowly that species can evolve. As we've seen in the last couple of years, bacteria and viruses can adapt and evolve in a matter of days because they reproduce very, very quickly. Human evolution takes thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. So organisms in the middle, mice that reproduce every 30 days or so, they evolve relatively quickly. Any of the larger organisms that have longer lifespans and later reproduction are going to evolve more slowly. All right, so here's our practice FRQ for evolution. So we have this data table that shows the beak size of 20 finches from 2 different islands in the Galapagos. And I want you to describe the difference in beak size between the 2 islands. And I want you to make a claim about the reason for this difference in beak size. So remember, make a claim is one of our key prompts. And we want to make sure that we provide a reason that we think there's a difference in the beak size. And then we want to justify that with evidence and information. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to seeing you in class.